you don't have access to Ableton Live Suite and Granulator 3, then the new drum sampler in Ableton Live 12 can make a pretty good semi-granular and glitchy synth. Let's have a listen to what it does to a banjo, then we'll discuss how it works and how it can be made. As I said at the beginning, we're using Drum Sampler. This is the new instrument in Ableton Live 12. It's effectively just a way of playing samples back, but it has a series of effects here. 8-bit FM, etc. I'm using the stretch effects here. It's some kind of time stretching algorithm. I'm not exactly sure what it does. It gives you control over grain, and it has this thing called factor. I couldn't find anything in the manual at the moment. Maybe they've not updated it yet, so I don't really know exactly what it does, but I've just kind of manipulated it to do what I want. You see, we have it here, the drum sampler. Let's just turn this down a little bit. It's controlled by a series of MIDI effects, which I won't go into too deeply. I've made another video recently on these and how this whole MIDI effect rack works. I'll link that up here, and I'll put it in the description below if you want to really understand what's going on here. But it basically just generates a series of, using expression control, it generates a series of MIDI pitches, which are then locked into a scale here, in this case a C minor. So a pitch comes in, if it's out of the scale it'll be corrected into the right scale, and then I have a chord function. The note that comes out here, the single note that comes out of here, goes into the chord function and generates these offsets here. And I'll come back to the chord though, because I'm using that to effectively generate additional grains, if you like. The drum sampler only plays a single tone in one go, but with strum and use of the chord you can get it to play a series of notes in short order, which gives a sort of pseudo grain effect. But I'll come back to that a little bit later on. Let's see what's going on here. So we have the drum sampler. Everything's controlled by this rack of macros here. We'll come to that. We have 3 LFOs, one controlling the scan speed. You can see at the moment it's set to a square wave. It's playing here at musical intervals, so every 2 bars a new square wave appears, and you see it's leaping as the square wave, the flanks of the square wave change. It causes the playhead here, the start position, to jump between 2 spots. Now if I was to change that here to scan shape, this affects here the waveform shape. If I change that to sine, you'll see it just, the grey area here moves back and forward with the sine wave through the wave. But to get a rhythmical effect, I've set this to a square at the moment. back. So yeah, so we have a way here with this LFO of controlling the position of the start, the playhead. It allows us to move through the sample. We then have an LFO which modulates the grain size. Let's close this one. The grain size here, which is this here. If I change the grain size, I have to have the stretch on. This is this effect here. I can get it down to 5 milliseconds, the grain size. Doesn't really work without a stretch factor. So there's some relationship here going on. As I say, I don't know what. But we can control grain size being played here. We can control the depth of the grain here. So let's have a look here. If I show you the notes I'm playing at the moment. What are we playing? Quarter notes. Let's have a look. Oh, let's go here. Sorry. So we're playing quarter notes. If I turn this off, the only thing that's letting them play out is the decay on the grain and the hold. So by using triggers, I effectively have control again over the grain and how the grain plays. I can make rhythms. If I put an additional note in here, you'll hear. Okay, so that's how we control how long this plays here effectively, how much of the sample is being played by the trigger and the grain decay and grain hold. The grain size, as I explained, manipulates the area here, the length that's being played. So this LFO here is a way of actually modulating the grain size using the modulation grain speed. Also again in musical divisions, and the grain size. So I have a way of modulating this value here, the grain size. Put that on. So we can modulate that. That's what the second LFO is doing. And the third LFO modulates the pitch, which is connected here to these. Let's turn on these MIDI effects now. It might sound a bit strange. We can modulate here. The expression control generates notes. If I go to 6, every time it gets a trigger, it generates a new pitch. You see it moving up. So it's generating a new note, playing in here through the scale and in to activate the sample. Now, as I say, this modulates the speed at which this happens. Oh, sorry, the range in which this happens. I can control here the pitch range with this, so it either plays very high notes or very low notes, and these notes are modulating around here. As I say, there's another video that explains all of this. You can have a look at that. But that's what this LFO is doing. I can restrict the range, then the notes are random, that they're not random, that they're generated here. And I can also control the speed at which the pitch range changes. So I have control over pitch, grain size, and the scan speed. Let's close this one up here. Let's go back to the... I also have some additional functions here. I have the filter. Here we can control this. This has a set resonance, but I can filter the tones we're getting out of here. And then we have these here. We've explained the scan speed. That's the rate at which the square is being played at the moment. So I can increase that in musical notes, musical time. So this will increase it, and that will force it to jump faster and faster. Set it back up. I think we had it on 2 bars. So every 2 bars we get a new flank on the wave. We also have the scan shape, which I explained before, allows me to change here, I can random, and it'll then jump randomly within the sample. So we have ways of controlling the position of the head and randomizing it. We also have, let's set that back to square. We also have a position. If I open the scan depth here, you'll see we're on 17% at the moment. That allows the whole range here. Let's close that up a little bit. This is connected also to the scan speed, so there's a relationship here. You have to play around a little bit sometimes. We have the scan position, so I can move this here from the center to the end. So if I now put the scan depth, it'll jump through the entire wave. And what I was doing previously to get the rhythm was I had this set to 50%, which is the middle. And this I just pulled in the sides. Until I got a range where it jumps between 17, was that? See, now it's jumping. Make this very small. So we have a way of changing range, to generate rhythms, position of the head, and the speed which goes through. So that's what's going on here. What else do we have? So I've explained the grain. We have the pitch here, we can control the pitch. We also have a strum effect, and what that is doing, that's on the chord here. This plays this series of offsets, and I have 1, 2, 3, 6 activated. If I set this to 0, it plays all of them at once. You see them all lit up at once, effectively playing a chord. But with the strum, I can offset the time between each of these notes, and that effectively gives me some sort of as a pseudo grain heads. You can hear now. It's playing them rapidly one after the other, but with a short interval between them, 30 milliseconds. So I turn on this. I can play with this value. It's all relationships in time here. You'll see that if I increase the time too much on the strum effect, then these don't have a chance to play. So there's a lot of relationships going on here. You just have to play around. Anyway, so that's the strum effect. Let's turn off this again. And increase our grain size, decrease that. We go back to a simple rhythm. Okay, so that's what's happening. You have these macros here which allow control over this head, the position, the grain size, the grain speed, and the pitch. And with all of these functions and the notes coming in, let's change our rhythm here. We can, well, let's turn that off. Let's go to very slow scan speed. Turn off our strum effect for a second. This will scan through here every 32 bars. It's going very slowly. We'll set this 50. Scan depth we'll put to the full range. You can see we can now get it to go very slowly through the sample and just play around. Modulating out this here 20%, so this will effectively, as I say, make this fluctuate around, and you can change here if you wanted to. The waveform, I have them set to square so I get rhythmical results. Change the grains time, introduce some strum. Very quickly you can get some very small grains, some very sort of, what's like, granular effects. If we go to random, and change the time, how often this, now we're on 3 bars, we go to 1 bar maybe. We can change the pitch steps, the range, only 3 steps now. I think you see you can, just by playing around, you can get some very interesting results from a simple sample. Okay, I hope that's clear. Let's have a look how the whole instrument is constructed. I've removed all the original MIDI instruments and the drum sampler. I've put the LFOs in here just because I wanted to name them, and that's a little bit quicker. And I've kept the original instrument rack with the macros here to speed things up as well. They're all named. So let's have a look and get things going. First of all, the LFOs you can find here under audio effects, just drop them in here. The instrument rack is here in instruments, drop that in as well. We're going to need the drum sampler, so we'll put that in. The MIDI effects as well. Expression control. Pitch. Scale to lock our scale in. And finally the chord to create those pseudo granular grains. We'll set up the expression control first. Close these up. So first thing, expression control, you need to click here, increment. That's what we'll be using, increases these values here. That we need at 0%. The random at 1%, and this is unibipolar. Just so that the notes swing around the trigger note you have here. You could have a unipolar just swing on one side, but it swings on both sides. We target that to control pitch here. So that's done. We can map here the steps to here, the pitch steps, and I set this at 16. So that's done as well. This is pretty much set up. We just need to set up our LFO to control it. We map that to this range here. Or before we map it, actually, we will set it up properly. This needs to be 100%. This needs to be square. And we need to have musical intervals here. We then map that now. And we can control the depth here and pitch with our macros. We need to map those. So the rate map to our pitch speed. The depth we map to the pitch range. And we need to adjust here the pitch range, but we don't want it so big. We don't want the notes to go into very high notes, very low notes. We'll keep that at 4%. Let's just have a look, see if that's working okay. small range. Okay, so that's set up effectively. We can close this now. The other LFO for the grain is also set up in the same manner, 100% square, musical intervals, and this one we're going to use to map to the grain in drum sampler. Let's close that for a second. So we map that here to grain, and the rate and the depth we map over to our macros. The rate is the speed, and the depth is the grain size. That should be done as well now. Yep, that's set up. Finally, we can do our scan speed here. We don't need to set the waveform here because we will map that as close. The one we need is one open, is close to pitch. We'll map this here to the macro. So this controls the scan shape. This one here we need to map in a different manner now. What we're going to do is we're actually going to use this position here. We're going to map that to the start here. So we'll map that there, and then we use this LFO to modulate this control here. So if we click on that, that should modulate that. The rate we can map to the scan speed, and the depth to the scan depth. So we have those all set up. Let's just drop a sample in so we can see what's actually happening here. Okay, we have life. So there we go. We have the scan position starting at 0, but we can set that to 50%. That'll start then in the middle. And the depth we need to make some adjustments on. Actually, the depth here we don't want 100% because if we're in the middle we want it to go 50% either side, but I found 50% didn't work very well, so I set it on 49.9%. so from here 49.9, here 49.9, so it swings here and here from the center. What else do we have then to set up? I think we need to finish the controls for, oh, this one we need 100% as well, sorry. That needs to be 100% as well. That's finished then. So we just need the controls for the drum sampler itself. We map those, which are the grain decay, the grain hold, attack, the stretch factor, the X factor more like, and the grain itself here, the grain size. One more thing we have is the frequency here. So that's it. Just the MIDI to finish off. Pitch we've got set up. The scale, you can choose your own scale. Let's put it in a minor. And then finally out, as I say, the way we're trying to generate extra grains, the chord, the strum we need to map here. That's our final macro, and put some values in here. I had 2, 5 and 7 semitones and -2. Oh, sorry, reset that. -2, -5 and -7, and then I think fine, let's close that. We don't need that anymore. Let's have a listen. Seems to be working. Let's try to see if my macro still works, or my variation. There we go. Okay, thank you if you made it this far. My name's Andrew. Hope this, as always, is of some use. Can someone get some fun out of it? Take care, enjoy your day. Goodbye.